You might recognize him as the dashing, golden-maned hero of thunder, the Norse god of lightning. But the true Thor was once a carrot-topped, plump lad toiling away, riding in a chariot tugged by goats that he'd feast on every evening. Delving into the enigmas of mythology, Thor, though a pivotal figure in Norse legends, was the offspring of Odin, the chief of the Aesir gods. Yet fewer know that his mother was a Jotun giantess. That's right, the same Jotnar often cast as the villains in Marvel's cinematic universe. But here's a twist. Thor's dad, Odin, was half Jotun himself, which makes Thor 3/4 Jotun and just a quarter Aesir. In a delightful irony, it's Thor who slays most of the Jotnar in the myths, and his success is largely due to his Jotun heritage. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Thor was a formidable deity, blessed with an imposing physique and superhuman strength. While he's often linked to his legendary hammer, Mjolnir, his colossal power was amplified tenfold by Mengingr, the power belt in Old Norse. Everything about Thor screamed power, even in combat. His voice was so mighty it could overpower the din of battle, and his residence in Asgard mirrored his might. Thor's hall, Bilskirnir, was the grandest in Asgard, boasting 540 rooms, where he resided with his kin. He was wed to the goddess Sif, revered as the deity of fertility, and they had a daughter named Thrud. But in the complex tapestry of Norse mythology, Sif wasn't the only one with whom he procreated. He also sired 2 offspring with the giantess Jarnsaxa, Modi and Magni, the god's mightiest sons. When not in his opulent abode, Thor traversed the 9 realms on a chariot hauled by 2 immortal goats, Tangniost and Tangrisnir, or Toothgrinder and Toothnasha. On many of these odysseys, he was joined by his uncle Loki. Yes, while modern depictions often cast Loki as Thor's friend or brother, in some tales, Loki was indeed Thor's uncle, with Odin and Loki being blood brothers. In others, they became sworn brothers through a ritual. Unlike the Marvel version, where Loki evolves from a mischievous trickster to a malevolent god, the original Loki started benevolent and turned malevolent over time. His journey as Thor's companion truly began with a prank involving Thor's wife's hair. One night, while Thor and Sif slumbered, Loki sneaked into their chamber with a pair of shears. Sif was famed for her lustrous golden locks, likened to golden fields under a setting sun's warm glow. Loki, in a mischievous act, cut Sif's hair while she slept. When Thor awoke and discovered the prank, he was livid. He knew Loki was the culprit and threatened to shatter every bone in his body unless he rectified his mischief. Loki, desperate, persuaded the dwarves of Nidavellir, the god's blacksmiths, to craft a new hairpiece for the goddess. The dwarves forged a magnificent golden tress that grew as if it were real. However, Loki, reveling in the caves, incited the dwarves to craft more incredible gifts to appease the other gods. The second gift Loki presented to Thor was to become one of the most potent weapons in all mythology, a symbol eternally linked with Thor. When Loki challenged the dwarves to forge the greatest weapon ever, he wagered his life, or more precisely, his head. But being the cunning trickster he was, Loki disguised himself as a fly and bit the dwarven smith Brokkr as he crafted the weapon. The dwarves forged a hammer that was nearly flawless, but the fly's sting in Brokkr's eye caused the handle to be slightly short. This meant Loki won the bet, but the dwarves, disagreeing with the outcome, were eager to silence Loki's boasts. The weapon they created was so powerful, it would alter the course of history between the Aesir gods of Asgard and the Jotnar giants. Mjolnir, Thor's hammer, could summon lightning and would always return to Thor when hurled. The 9 realms knew of the hammer, and many of the Jotnar had their skulls crushed by the legendary weapon. So powerful was it that in some versions, even mighty Thor had to wield it with his enchanted iron gloves, Jarngrimr. Armed with his strength-boosting belt, his iron gloves, and his enchanted hammer, Thor became the most formidable deity in Norse mythology. But these weren't the only tricks Thor had up his magical iron sleeves. He also had an inexhaustible food supply in the form of 2 goats. While adventuring, Thor and Loki were offered shelter by a family of peasant farmers. In gratitude, Thor prepared dinner for them, slaughtering his goats, cooking them, and sharing the meal, warning the family not to harm the bones before eating. However, Thjalfi and Roskva, the peasants' children, didn't heed his words and pierced one of the bones to extract the marrow. The next morning, Thor resurrected the goats, but one limped due to its damaged bones. Thor was enraged, as was his wont, and to appease his fury, the children became his servants, accompanying him on his journey. Thor, Loki, and their new companions, Thjalfi and Roskva, ventured into the giant lands of Jotunheim. That night, they found what seemed to be a massive structure for shelter, but what they initially took for a building was the giant Skrymyr's glove, whose snores shook the land like earthquakes. The next night, they sought refuge under a nook, keeping an eye on the giant. For different reasons, Thor was irked by the giant. He tried and failed 3 times to strike Skrymir on the head with his hammer, but each attempt was dismissed as mere twigs falling on his head. After Thor's 3rd attempt, Skrymir warned Thor about the daunting challenges at Utgard, the stronghold of the giants, and that if he continued to be as bold, he'd be in deep trouble. Undeterred, Thor continued his journey and reached the grand castle of Utgard, where they met King Tgaraloki, the lord of the giants. Loki claimed he could eat faster than anyone, but lost to a creature named Logi. Thor attempted 3 foot races against a diminutive creature named Hugi and lost all 3 rounds. Then it was Thor's turn to pick a contest, and he chose a drinking contest. Loki handed Thor a giant horn of ale, teasing him that he wasn't a real man if he couldn't drain it in 3 gulps. Wanting to prove himself, Thor took the challenge. In the morning, Thor's group, courtesy of Tgaraloki, feasted and drank. Loki then questioned Thor about his performance in the challenges. Thor admitted his discontent, fearing Tgaraloki's cunning. Once the party left, Tgaraloki revealed that he never would have let them enter if he knew their true power. He confessed that he was Skrymir all along, and Thor's missed hammer strikes could have been fatal. The challenges were an illusion, a distraction for his own safety. Tgaraloki explained that the challenges were all an illusion, and he never imagined they would perform so well. Loki had been trying to out-eat fire, which is insatiable. Hugi tried to outrun thought, which is always in motion. Thor's drinking horn reached into the ocean, so as he drank, he actually lowered the ocean's levels, affecting the tides. The cat that Thor attempted to lift was, in fact, the world serpent, Jormungandr, and everyone was terrified when Thor was able to lift a portion of this cat, because he had held the great serpent up to the sky, nearly triggering Ragnarok, the end of the world. The old woman that Thor wrestled was Old Age, and there's no one that Old Age can't bring down. From all this, Thor learned that trickery was a useful tool to achieve his goals, a lesson he would remember later. The relationship between the gods and giants was complex. They could be fighting or assisting each other, sometimes even marrying, but often betraying one another. The giants were a constant threat to both humans and gods. Thor fought many battles against these creatures, such as the one against Geirrid. One day, Hrungnir, one of the strongest giants, challenged Thor to a horse race. But Odin had slipped Hrungnir the reins of the 8-legged horse Sleipnir, a beast no other horse could beat. After his loss, Hrungnir agreed to join the Aesir gods in a drink. But as he sat, surrounded by the gods celebrating the Old Father's victory, he became enraged and challenged the gods to a fight. Offended by their guest's disrespect, Thor attacked him, taking the giant by surprise and striking him with his hammer. The giant fell on Thor, and the god found himself pinned under his weight. Seeing his father in trouble, Magni, Thor's son, who was only 3 years old, approached to help. The young god, with ease, lifted the giant's body and freed his father. Magni boasted how he wished he had arrived earlier, so he could have faced the giant first and wouldn't have needed weapons. Odin was shocked by Magni's boast, but Thor couldn't be prouder. In an ironic twist of fate, mirroring his son's confident claim, Thor was soon to experience what it was like to be without his own weapon, Mjolnir. One day, Thor realized his hammer, Mjolnir, was gone. He sought the help of the dwarfs, and they quickly discovered that a giant named Thrym had taken it. Thrym said he'd return the hammer only if the goddess Freya would agree to become his wife, but Freya outright refused. One of Thor's friends came up with a plan to retrieve his hammer. Thor should dress Freya up and pretend to marry Thrym. Loving his hammer deeply, Thor agreed to the plan and disguised Freya. With Loki by his side, Thor went to Thrym's home to reclaim his hammer. Thrym hosted a feast to celebrate his wedding. Thor, disguised as the bride, ate an entire ox, which made Thrym suspicious. Loki noticed Thrym's reaction and told him that Freya had been fasting for 8 days out of excitement for the wedding. Thrym then noticed a lightning-like sparkle in the bride's eye. Loki lied again, saying that she hadn't slept in a week, thrilled about the wedding. Convinced, Thrym fulfilled his promise and handed over Mjolnir. Loki, though, seized the moment, took back Mjolnir, and defeated the giant. This was one of the few tales where Loki was seen as a friend and helped Thor. But this wasn't always the case. Loki, known for his cunning, had moments of both helping and betraying Thor when it came to saving his own skin. Once, Loki found himself in a tight spot, captured by the giant Gyrd. To win his freedom, Loki promised Gyrd he'd bring Thor to him unarmed, without his hammer Mjolnir or his belt of strength. Loki persuaded Thor to leave his weapons behind for this visit, but on their journey, they stopped at the home of Grid, a kind-hearted giantess. She warned Thor about Loki's betrayal and Gyrd's trap. Grid equipped Thor with her weapons, preparing him for the upcoming confrontation. When they reached Gyrd's place, Thor, though unarmed with his usual gear, was not defenseless. The giant attacked, hurling a searing iron ball at Thor. But with Grid's weapons and his incredible strength, Thor caught the ball and threw it back, defeating Gyrd. But this wouldn't be Loki's greatest betrayal. The long-standing conflict between the gods and giants culminated in Ragnarok, the apocalypse. Odin had long anticipated and dreaded this event, signifying the cosmos' end, despite Odin's efforts to avert it. The cataclysm unfolded, with the giants alongside Loki's fierce offspring, Fenrir, the wolf, Hel, the goddess of the underworld, and Jormungandr, the sea serpent, launching an assault on Asgard. In the opening battle, Fenrir slew Odin, setting a grim tone for the other gods. Yet Thor, wielding his enchanted hammer, refused to yield. His final battle was with Jormungandr, who emerged from the ocean's depths intent on destruction. The clash was fierce, ending with Thor defeating the serpent. However, victory came at a grave cost. Thor, poisoned, managed to take 9 steps, one for each of the realms, before collapsing, marking the end of our hero and Ragnarok. Despite the overwhelming loss, hope flickered through the aftermath. A handful of humans and gods survived the end of the old world. Together, they stood poised to forge a new era, emerging from the ruins of Ragnarok to rebuild and breathe life into a new world order. And so, the saga of Thor, the god of thunder, came to a valiant end, but his legacy endures far beyond the battlefields of mythology. Today, we remember Thor every week on the day named in his honor, Thursday or Thor's Day. There was one god who didn't just survive, but was resurrected after Ragnarok, a god that was loved by all and whose death started the whole chain of events leading to Ragnarok.